Hi, John Carousel Gardner here with BeVital.life. And today I want to talk to you about tending to your wrists while in your yoga practice, your asana practice. In particular, I want to help guide how to offload load that transfers directly from the wrist into the mat. Now, I cue this a lot in class, but I want to make it a little bit easier for you to see the details of what I'm talking about because the rooms are big and sometimes you can't see these subtle movements. So let's take a look at the hands and the wrists as we place them on the mat for postures like downward dog or tabletop. What I tend to cue here is keeping the wrist crease square or parallel with the short end of the mat, right? And then I talk about pressing into your fingertips, right? Bearing weight into your fingertips. The goal here is to get used to bearing load all the way down to the end of your fingers instead of dropping the load directly from the wrist into the mat. We don't really want to be doing this. We want to avoid this as much as possible because that's not really comfortable. And we tend to wear out in our practice and wrists get sore and tired and so on. So we want to start by getting used to bearing some load in the fingertips. It's not likely that we'll be able to sustain a downward dog or a chaturanga on our fingertips, perhaps with a lot of practice. And with younger bones, maybe that's possible, but for most of us, this is impractical. What we want to do is just get used to bearing load, right? Pressing down, feeling that. Then bringing the fingers down to the mat. Now, you can see that I have a pretty big hyperextension here of my fingers. That's come with practice, but even so, even if you can only bend your fingers back this far, you can still press down, add some weight into the fingers themselves, and then also into the roots of the fingers. What are the roots of the fingers? The roots of the fingers are where they attach to the hand, right? So it's really just these structures here. It's this finger to hand joint that is the root of the finger. Sorry, let's put that in the sun. The finger to hand joint. That is the root of the finger, okay? So we're going to press down into the roots of the fingers, and you can have the fingers elevated while you do that, right? They don't have to be on the mat. They can be up, right? And then the palms, pressing into the palms, right? Pressing down into the palms of the hands. So when you mix all those together, you have the fingertips, the fingers, the roots of the fingers, and the palms, and really, you don't have to have a lot of load dropping directly from the wrist, from the forearm, the bone of the forearm, into the mat. So when we approach our posture, for example, say starting in tabletop, right? We press down into the roots, into the fingertips. We press down into the fingers, the roots of the fingers, and then the palms. And the last thing that I tend to cue here with respect to the hands themselves is to squeeze the hands, the palms, towards the midline. The effect of that is to draw the weight into the middle finger, the index finger, and the thumb, and the structures of the hand that support the middle finger, index finger, and the thumb. So the inner part of the hand gets more of the load. You can even see how the outside of the wrist tends to loft a little bit up off the mat. Now, that's helpful because the other thing that we cue is the external rotation of the upper arms, right? So you can see when we externally rotate the upper arms, the tendency is for the load to drop to the outside of the wrist. And with that, and that's exactly the thing that we were just trying to fix. So when we externally rotate the upper arms, the upper arm rolling outward and tucking into the shoulder joint in a safe way, we also want to add the squeeze of the hands towards the midline. And you can practice this just by pulsing your hands in a little bit, right? So we start in tabletop. We externally rotate the upper arms. We press down into the fingertips, fingers, roots, and palms. Squeeze the hands towards the midline. Curl the toes under. Lift the tail to come into downward dog. And you can see how as I press my chest towards my toes, this external rotation wants to drift away a little bit. I have to keep adding energy to do that external rotation. And at the same time, I need to squeeze my hands towards the midline so that I don't load the outside of my wrists. Now, you'll often see me, if you look closely at my hand positions, you'll see me actually here in my posture, right? And the reason I like this posture a lot is because when I'm here, there's literally no load dropping from my arm through my wrist joint directly into the mat. It's all being translated through my hand. That straight line from my forearm through my wrist joint into my hand, and it's distributed over a much larger area, right? I've got 5 roots of fingers, 5 fingers. Well, the thumb doesn't really carry too much load. It's hard to bear. It's hard to bear load into the thumb here. The thumb is more of a stabilizer. The load is moving through all of these structures, and I feel very balanced, very strong, because it's a broad structure and there's no load on my wrists. So if you can get to the point where you can drop the weight into the roots of the fingers, and the tips, your wrists are going to last a lot longer in your practice. Okay, so I hope that's some helpful information and maybe a little bit more detailed look at the way I cue hand position and wrist loading in class. Of course, if you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me at bevital.life. Come to my website, fill out the contact form, and I'll see you in class. Thanks for joining me.